probably one of the most significant pivots came when a super dear friend of mine, Steve Herbert, came to visit me, and he was working for magician David Copperfield. And I thought, wow, how cool is that? I was kind of trotting along, doing, working. I had a house, I had a good life. And something when, as soon as he said that, it sparked something inside of my body. I had this immediate sense of like, oh my gosh, I need to do that. How fabulous. And he actually set up an interview for me, and I spent a weekend with the crew in Atlantic City. I remember it very clearly, and I got the job. And everyone thought I'd lost my mind. My parents were like, "Wait a minute, what are you going to do? You're going to go tour the world now with David Copperfield?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm going to do that." And I felt so good about it.
Welcome to Take a Beat, a podcast dedicated to those who are wanting to hit pause on the hustle, get clear on your direction, and head toward the life that you envision. Today's episode is an interview with Sabine Hutchison, who is known as the Queen of Reinvention. Having experienced several career pivots, including the time she left the science world to work for a world-famous magician, Sabine is no stranger to the art of starting again. In this episode, she shares more of her story and how she went from scientist to entrepreneur, co-founding a biotech vendor relations company and authoring the book Beyond the Ladder, which helps women redefine what career success looks like to them. She also talks about storytelling and how it helped her during times of reinvention, and why she wanted to start the Ripple Network, an online platform that helps women transform ideas into inspiring talks and presentations. Take a listen to hear more. Thanks so much for joining today, Sabina. I appreciate you coming on and being open to talk more about your story and your career pivots, as well as your passion for storytelling and how that's been helpful for you along your own journey. To get us started, do you mind sharing a little bit about your career journey so far and how that's led to where you're at now?
Yeah, definitely. And lots of pivots, to say the least, is accurate in the description of my career. And I obviously spent some time reflecting when you go into a podcast like this to think about, yeah, your career and your life. And when I think about my career and where it all started, it started growing up. It started with my parents, and this ability to pivot, I think, really came from them. I grew up in a household where it was almost all women. So I have two sisters, and my mom and my dad. My dad was the only male in the picture. And what was great is my parents taught us a lot about, my dad specifically taught us a lot about curiosity and just asking a lot of questions. And he taught us just to not be afraid of anything. So with cars, changing oil, when you used to be able to do that, you don't do that on cars anymore at the home, or just set spark plugs, or to build fences. My dad taught us all of that. He taught us to be curious about how things work. And my mom taught us about resilience and about just picking up and like grit. I would say that's what she did. And those skills that I've learned and what I saw growing up are just such a key part of my ability to pivot now, and have taught me to always ask the question, what if I don't? So that's what I usually ask myself before a pivot. Not should I, but I think back, I take the time to reflect and think, if I don't do this, what are the potential outcomes of that? So what could happen? And I studied chemistry, so I come from a science background. However, I never wanted to work in a lab. I studied chemistry again for the curiosity side of things, and that I loved understanding how things work. And I got out of school. As I mentioned when we were first catching up, I lived in Columbia, Maryland for a while. And my first job was actually disposing of chemicals. And that allowed me to use my science background, but it also gave me the ability that I had to engage with people, which I really loved. For me, being in a research lab was not something that I wanted. So that job gave me the opportunity to do both, which ultimately led me to living in Salt Lake City. I had another pivot in my life to go work at an incinerator.
Oh, wow.
And then probably one of the most significant pivots came when a super dear friend of mine, Steve Herbert, came to visit me. And he was working for magician David Copperfield. And I thought, wow, how cool is that? I was kind of trotting along, doing, working. I had a house, I had a good life. And as soon as he said that, it sparked something inside of my body. I had this immediate sense of like, oh my gosh, I need to do that. How fabulous. And he actually set up an interview for me, and I spent a weekend with the crew in Atlantic City. I remember it very clearly, and I got the job. And everyone thought I'd lost my mind. So my parents were like, wait a minute, what are you going to do? You're going to go tour the world now with David Copperfield. And I was like, yeah, I'm going to do that. And I felt so good about it. And the first stop was in Stockholm, and I met the gaze of a man. And I fell in love with that man. And he was from Germany. And that's how I ended up now where I am in Germany. So again, kind of listening to myself and listening to my intuition. So those pieces of my career were very unexpected. And sometimes I think there's a balance between making decisions based on a plan and a strategy, but also listening to your intuition. I think that that's a key piece that some of us kind of push aside. And yeah, and here I am 28 years later now living in Germany after I came with 2 suitcases, didn't speak the language. Um, yeah, that was a new start for me. That was probably, again, one of the other big pivots of my life. And since then, I've worked for companies. I started a company. I co-founded a health life science company with a really good friend of mine, and have written a book, Beyond the Ladder, and started the Ripple Network, which is probably one of the newest ventures that started this year, actually, in 2025.
Well, very cool. I mean, your story has a literal element of magic to it.
Literal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When you were working for David Copperfield or with them, what were you doing?
I was a business assistant.
Okay.
So this idea, he was going to open up a restaurant, and that was supposed to be my job. It didn't happen. So I just ended up being an assistant for him, not on stage, backstage. I was not anywhere in the limelight. It was all behind the scenes.
And I guess, did you have any reservations at all at taking that leap?
Nope.
Okay.
It's so bizarre. I had absolutely none. And it was because I listened. I felt it. I knew it was the right thing to do. And I just went with it. And I thought, I can always go back. If this doesn't work out, there are going to be amazing lessons that I learn. I'm going to be able to travel. If I do, working as a business assistant, I would learn things. I felt that somehow would balance out my life and what I was doing in the science world. And I just thought, what if I don't? Then I'm going to be missing out on a lot of amazing opportunities, and I'll learn no matter what I do.
Mm-hmm. And what was that pivot like in terms of going from, like you said, the sciences into the business world?
Yeah, it was a big change. Obviously, the structure that you have that I had before was completely different, because you're on tour, you're on buses and on planes and setting up in different cities. So there was a bit of structure to it, but it was a different kind of thinking. And that's the interesting part of that was more around dealing with people and dealing with spontaneous situations that happen, because each day was completely different. So it helped build my ability to engage with people and to be quick on my feet. I think that was really, and that kind of is, I think, also where part of the storytelling comes in, because you have to kind of be quick and adapt and move. And that really helped me to think about how I engage and how I got people to do what I needed them to do, or to, move in a certain direction with the show, or something that David needed. So it was really helpful for that.
It's a really cool, surprising pivot that I wasn't expecting.
Yeah, it is. That's not a big one that I have on my CV. So people hear that, they're like, I remember when I was first applying for positions in Germany, I did put that there because there would have been a gap. And I could always tell when people would read my CV, the eyes would always get bigger when they got to that spot. So that is quite a pivot.
What was it like when you first moved to Germany and essentially had to start over in another country?
Yeah, a lot of what I did here was, first I learned German. So I spent a lot of time just learning the language, and then starting to grow a network, because I knew one person and that we weren't married then, but now my husband. And I had to build a network. I had to learn how to engage with people. I had to learn how to go to the bank. I had to learn everything completely new. So I felt like I'd taken 20 steps back to where I'd been in my previous life. It was like a different life. And learning how to be okay with that and not to be completely frustrated with the situation, because it's definitely, I got a lot of rejections when I was applying for jobs. People back then, English wasn't very common. So, I mean, I could introduce myself pretty much in German and that's it. So it's difficult to sell yourself, if you don't have a grasp of the language. So it was a lot of ups and downs. It was a roller coaster for sure of emotions. Um, I think one of the things that I've really learned from being in that, I was in a situation where I was a minority. I was rarely a true minority in my life. And I think this tolerance and this openness, it really shifted also a mindset for me about being under have more understanding about people of where they are and the situations that they're in. So that definitely helped um, to not be so judgmental, because you don't know the backstory behind people. So nobody knew my backstory and what I was struggling with and dealing with here. So my level of tolerance and understanding, and I think a bit of compassion, actually grew a lot with that step and that pivot. And it's interesting because I think that's, we're going to talk about storytelling. That's where it actually started, because for me, because I was learning a new language and my vocabulary was limited, I would have to describe things a lot. So I would have to come up with ways for people to understand me without using a language that I knew. I feel I'm articulate in English. Some days better, since I speak two languages now. Some days maybe I'm not so articulate. I can use also incorrect sentence structure in English. But I had to describe things, and I had to get people to understand me with a limited vocabulary. And I think that's such actually a benefit to storytelling, because you get creative in how you start to talk about things or ask for what you need. So that was a really good storytelling skill set to learn while I was learning the language.
And I'm guessing that helped you then when you were applying for jobs or looking for work eventually.
Yeah, eventually, yes. But I was fortunate enough that my first job came from a friend of my husband's. Her name's Birgit. She introduced me to someone that was running a lab, and they actually needed someone that spoke English. So that again, to get that first job, I could do it in English. So that was fine. But I had to take, again, a few steps back. So I was, that pivot in my life, I was regularly felt like kind of taking steps back instead of what felt like moving forward. So I took an assistant job that I probably would have taken out of college. So it was a lot of adjusting for myself in my mind and thinking, okay, it's all right. This is because there's a bigger picture. I can do this. I need an opportunity. And to always just keep that mindset is like, just give me a chance and I'll take off. So that was important for me to do, to really keep that kind of mindset in those situations.
So keeping an eye on the big picture, so to speak, were there other things that helped you
Yeah.
in the moment of taking a step back in your career and maybe even in just having to figure things out and feeling maybe a little bit lost?
Yeah. Yeah, I felt lost a lot. There were definitely tears and frustrations during that time, but it definitely, if I go back and I think about, the things that I learned also from my parents, that resilience and kind of keep going, that definitely stuck with me, because even, for my parents too, me moving here was a bit crazy. They were like, "What am I doing?" And it's actually another little tidbit there is that my mom's actually German. And my dad's American. He was stationed here in the military. So
Oh,
my
wow.
mom did the reverse, but we never spoke German growing up, ever. That's why I have a German first name. It's really weird. People see my name and they're like, well, wait a minute, that doesn't match. So my mom was incredible in that she didn't necessarily want me to come here because I was so far away, but she really gave me that encouragement around, you can do this, Sabina. I had the same thing. When I moved to the US, I didn't speak any English. I needed to learn that as well. So her stories and how she actually took steps were very encouraging for me. So she was a real She was a real grounding point for me during that time.
And do you and your mom speak German now?
No, no, it's so odd. She doesn't. When she's been here to visit and we're in a group, then she does speak German, but she doesn't. Sometimes I'll say something and then, or she'll hear me and she go, "Wow, Sabina, your German's gotten pretty good." I'm like, "Oh, thanks." And she corrects me too. But she doesn't speak German to me. It's really interesting.
Well, that's a cool sort of polar shift too of, almost doing the
Yeah.
reverse of what your mom did.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
I guess to kind of maybe keep going with the storytelling element too, have you found that there were other places where that's come in handy for you? It does sound like that's something that you're very interested in and passionate about.
Definitely. Yeah. I love stories from people. And I think that so I ask a lot of questions of people to try to get their stories out because I'm very curious to hear about people's lives and how they've gotten to where they are and their history. Because again, there's so much behind people besides what you just see. And so the storytelling piece is definitely something that I do. And I do a lot of that by asking questions. And I'm just fascinated with storytelling because if you think about it, it's like at, it's where we all started, right? First, we used stories to tell before there was the written word how to find food or how to be aware of danger. So stories are just such a integrated part of I think all of our lives and of communities, and communities used it to share information. And I just think that it's so valuable. And especially today, I think it's even more so, looking at the way that we communicate, because there's so much and you're bombarded with so much information that storytelling and doing it well can be such an added value, especially in the world of data that we live in. Because I think if you can take the data and then build a story around it, that's very powerful, especially being a leader within an organization, because people don't just want to see slides and to see facts on a page, but they want to understand the whys behind it and what's the impact and what's the bigger picture. And that all happens with storytelling. So I feel that it's a very crucial part of where we are, because we need also stories are empathy, and we need so much of that right now in the world that we live in.
Can you talk a little bit more about the idea of using story to illustrate data?
If somebody just talks to me, if I want to get something pushed through, or if I have an initiative that I want to start, and if I just share some facts, people go, "Oh, that's too bad and that's unfortunate." But if they hear the whys behind it and the impact of that and the empathy of that, because I feel like as human beings, where we tend to be moved by the words and the stories that people have. And that is kind of the cream to get people moving forward. It's interesting. I don't know if you've seen, Jane Goodall has just, have you seen that on Netflix, or I think it's called The
No.
Last Words, or, well, at the very end of that, listen to that, because that's exactly what she does, because she talks about, she's obviously had a big impact on the world. And there's a lot of science and a lot of data about what she does. But her message in the end, whew, is beautiful. And that's the storytelling, because that pulls at our emotion and at our core.
You also now have created the Ripple Network, which is a platform to help
Hmm.
other people develop and then share their stories. What was the
Hmm.
inspiration to create that?
Yeah. I think it was a year ago, I decided that I wanted to take a course on how to write a TED Talk and potentially present a TED Talk. And I took a course from someone, her name is Emma Weiner, and she's actually a partner now in the Ripple Network. She's amazing. And I was in the course with three other ladies, and it was an incredible process to build a story and to come up with the idea and how do you, again, kind of bring in these pieces of emotion? When do you bring certain pieces in? And we all wrote our stories, our TED Talks, and we were able to share them on a call together, and we could invite people to listen to the talks. And all three of us did not actually go to the TED stage. It's a couple there, you weren't necessarily accepted to present because it's tough to get on that. And I thought, this is horrible. These are such incredible stories. And they're going to stay on a computer or in a notebook, and nobody's going to hear these stories. I was like, this just can't be. And then I thought about, if the three of us have just done this, how many other stories are out there that are just, that need to be told? So I had this idea to create the Ripple Network. I was like, all right, how to create a platform where people, women, this is again focused for women, because I wanted to create an environment where they felt safe to practice the stories. So it's a place to write and to work on stories or presentations, whatever you want to do. If you want to do a keynote or an inspirational talk, but also then a platform where the stories can be put out in social media, because most people aren't necessarily comfortable presenting things and saying, hey, look at me. I've done this great talk, and listen to that. So I wanted to also give a platform where you could share it, and it could go out into social media, but also the practice piece. I felt that was so key. That's what I found when I was in the course, that writing words and then reading them in your mind are completely different than speaking them. Totally different world. And I thought, how can we practice? Where in the world do we practice? Everyone says do it in front of the mirror. But that doesn't necessarily, I think that that's a good thing to do, but I believe that what we've created in the Ripple Network is that you can actually record, upload, and get feedback. So you get feedback from experts and the community, and you see yourself and you hear yourself. You catch things that you say. Somebody was editing something for me, and there was a certain word that I used. I don't remember what it was, but I think I hope I've stopped using it. But you hear words that you use regularly. I don't know if you notice that with yourself when you edit your podcasts. And you're like, oh, wait, I say that word like 20 times, but you don't know it if you don't hear yourself say it. So I think it's just such an excellent tool to improve and to get better. So that was the idea behind the Ripple Network.
It's cool, the idea of having that space and the idea of getting the feedback from people who maybe are also interested in the same thing. So it creates that support and that safety that we're all here to do the same thing, essentially.
Yeah. Exactly. And I think one of the things I thought that I would share, because this is really what it's about. This week, one of the ladies, I'm sponsoring several women that are scientists in Africa in the Ripple Network to get them started. They're not able to do it themselves, so I put them in the program. And one of them wrote a note, and she said, since I've been practicing with the Ripple Network, I'm no longer afraid to talk. When I begin to speak, my energy is like a flowing stream of language, constantly adapting and shaping itself to convey meaning. So to share ideas, to build connections with those I'm communicating with. And that's what it's about. So it's feeling more comfortable. And you can see it in her too. It's incredible. Like if I look at the very first video, and we just start with like introducing yourself. I mean, it's that you get really to the basics. Like, what's your story? Who are you? And then you get different challenges. And so it gives you really a chance to think about and to look at how you speak.
It's amazing if you don't really see yourself like recorded back or get that feedback, that we all might have an idea of how we're presenting ourselves until
Exactly.
you really get that up close and personal. Oh, actually, I do say every third word, or
Right. Yeah. I think in my first talk, I was shaking so much. I did this a few years ago, and I had to literally lock my legs. And then when I listened to it after they put it online, I thought, oh my, I said, I think 10,000 times.
Yeah.
But it was listening to it that made me aware of it. And so you think about it. Sometimes I even have words. If I catch myself, I'll put it on my screen or put it somewhere here, and to try to trigger myself to think of something else to use. Yeah.
Do you find, or have you gotten feedback from some of the participants, what sometimes makes it challenging for them to tell their story?
Yeah. Some of it is language, because most of the people that are there a lot here, I'm dealing with a lot of individuals in Europe. So English isn't their first language. So doing it in a different language can be a struggle. So you have to work on the clarity and slowing down, especially if your if your English is, you have a strong accent. You can actually compensate for that by slowing down, and that helps with the clarity that you speak. So that's one thing about the speed of the way that you speak. And the other piece is about how to structure what you're going to say, to actually sit down and think about, okay, I want to say this, and it follows with this, and then that ties into this. So to create this kind of red thread through what you want to say, because if you don't do that, you can jump all over the place. You can, start here, and then you're nervous. Then you go off and like, oh, wait a minute, I wanted to say this. And then you jump back here. So it's the structural piece of it. I think that those are probably two of the main things that people have talked about, that they like the structure on how, or the support with how to structure what you want to say, even if it is introducing yourself. Even
Fair
though,
enough. Yeah. Do you all also, I wonder, sometimes when you're speaking or you're presenting a story, there's the idea of being performative about it, but that can take you out of who you kind of are. And how do you deal with the authenticity piece of it?
Yeah, definitely. Because I've heard from a lot of people like, oh, I watched Michelle Obama, or I watched this person, or I watched this person. And you try to then take on characteristics of those individuals. I think watching people is a good thing. So though, listening to podcasts and hearing what people say can be helpful, but it's also just getting comfortable with your own quirkiness. There are things that you do that are you that can actually add value to your speaking, and to be okay with that, and to just embrace that, and to not go, oh, I shouldn't do that. I shouldn't do that. Well, maybe you should, because that makes you unique. So it's really about not trying to be someone else, but finding your own speed and your own brand and who you are. And this idea of perfection, what is perfection? And I need to sound this way, or I need to say this, but it's improving who you are and how you want to do it, but not always comparing yourself to someone else. I think that that's what so many of us do, isn't it? We compare ourselves and think, I have to be like that in order to be impressive, and I have to use this type of vocabulary to be impressive. And that's not always the case. We can always improve, but you still need to be who you are. I use my hands a lot. You've seen it here too. I do. That's just something that I do. And I try to use that so that's what we did in the TED Talk too. You learn how to use your hands. So if you use them a lot, how can you do that that's beneficial in your talk?
Gotcha. I also use my hands a lot. It's like I have to sit on them. Speaking of embracing your own quirkiness, have you worked with folks, or do you have any advice or tips for people who are less comfortable with public speaking or who aren't used to it, and the idea of having to think on your feet?
Yeah, I think I have two things. I think the one is about the ability to adapt quickly in situations, and to pull, that it looks very seamless. I mean, we all see people like that. You're like, how do they do that? And it's just incredible, and the ease, and they pull a story in, and they're just, it just is gorgeous. That is a lot of practice. And I think that that's what people don't realize, that beautiful flow and their ability to do that has taken a long time. And it's the practice. It's listening to yourself. It's honing in on the words. What kind of is your language, and what fits to you that you feel comfortable with. I'm also, one of the things, because in the book that I wrote, Beyond the Ladder, I tell people to write down their stories. I have a notebook too, where I do that. I write down situations that I hear, that I experience. This week, I was at the airport, and there was a man. We were waiting at the gate to not check in, but to board the plane. And he was kind of pacing back and forth in front of us, where a bunch of people were sitting. And he said, "I'm the president. People should listen to me." I thought, well, that's an interesting perspective on leadership. All right, you can have that. What I did, I got my notebook out and I wrote it down, because that's a great thing for me to use later. And if I don't write it down, I'll forget it. So like we have our song playlists, when you're you're at a wedding or a party, and you're like, oh my God, I want to have the DJ play this song. And people say, well, what do you want to hear? And you can't think of it. So you go to your playlist and you're like, oh, I'd like to have these songs. I have a story playlist. So I write those down and I look at them regularly. And then I start to use those in conversations, and I have them here more front of mind. So I'm able to pull from them. And that's what helps, I believe, with what you're asking about, with the ease of that and the flow is because you know it. You have your playlist, and so you can pull from it with ease. So I think that that's really important. And I believe that that's something that people just underestimate. All those beautiful stories and situations you've experienced, write them down. It's key.
It sounds there's a lot of preparation going into it all the time.
All the time. You're right.
Mhm. Whether you're writing down these things that are happening to you that could be fodder for later on down the line, or
Hmm.
maybe continually practicing, even if you're just at a coffee shop talking to whoever is taking your order and being quick
Hmm.
and on the fly, whatever it might be.
Yeah. Yeah. Practice different ways to introduce yourself. That's also something that's great to do. How would you introduce yourself if you run into a senior leader within the company, or how would you introduce yourself at a networking event, or what are different ways to introduce yourself? Because that gets you more comfortable with thinking about different skills and different things that you'd like to highlight about yourself in different situations with different stakeholders. So it's practice. I think that that's just so important. I think sometimes you see someone speak and you're like, whoa, that's amazing, and you forget about all the work that went into that, and it's the everyday work that goes into it.
That's helpful. I think that perspective that it doesn't just happen by itself. I mean, maybe for some people, but for a lot of people, it is
Yeah.
intentional work.
Yeah, you're right. Some people are very natural. They're that they can do it. But I think the majority of us have to work at it.
And if someone is interested in maybe taking more ownership of their story or just becoming a better storyteller in general, what would be one piece of advice
Mhm.
you might have for them?
Yeah, the two things which we actually spoke about. One is practice. Practice, practice, practice. Listen to yourself. Get comfortable with your own voice. I've heard so many people say, "Oh my God, I can't stand to listen to my voice." I'm like, "Oh, that's terrible because people hear your voice every day." So you should feel you should feel comfortable with listening to your own voice. I think that that's one piece is the practice, and don't underestimate it to really do it on a regular basis. And then the other piece is really doing your story playlist. I think that those are two things that if you do that, that could be an excellent start in your storytelling journey.
Those are both great pieces of advice. If you had, on a slightly different tangent, if you had advice for someone who's maybe embarking on a reinvention journey, or they are at that point, given that you've had
Mhm.
some periods in your own life where you had to reinvent or pivot, what would be your advice for someone who maybe is just starting out?
Yeah. That I think that that's a tough one because we're all so different. I'm less risk adverse. I'm I like I I'm comfortable with being in kind of risky or uncomfortable situations. One of the phrases that I use in the book is like rarely be in your comfort zone. And that's me. I think that when we're in that space, it's what comes out at the end is it can be really incredible because I feel that that's the space where we grow, and when we challenge ourselves, it just opens up totally new skills, new thought processes, and we grow. Just be okay with also not having like the perfect outcome or the perfect idea around what it's all going to look like. You can have plans, definitely. So I don't say, throw caution to the wind and to do totally crazy things, but plan and also be okay with if the outcome is going to just be a bit different because that's going to lead you to a totally new place. I mean, I thought, there's so many steps that I'd taken where I thought, oh, I didn't really think that I wanted to do that, but they all led, you have to, you, everything leads you to where you are, right? And I'm pretty happy where I am right now. So even all of the things that were like, that could have gone a bit differently have brought me to where I am right now. And I think that that's a pretty cool place to be. So to think, yeah, more along those lines and maybe to be a bit more relaxed with yourself.
You mentioned earlier too the idea of following your intuition and being comfortable following your
Mm,
intuition.
absolutely.
Was that something that you were always comfortable with, or did that take some time and practice?
I'm pretty in tune with my intuition. I didn't always listen.
Yeah.
And the times that I didn't listen were not good. Okay, again, they kind of led me in a direction, but those, and it's again back to the point about, what steps do you take? Those situations I will never do again because I've had two very key times in my life that were pretty significant where I didn't listen to my intuition, and now I do. So now I'm very aware. If I know and I listen to my body and I spend time listening to it, it's not haphazard. I still weigh out things, but if I know it's the right thing to do, I will definitely go with the intuition. So don't push it away. I think oftentimes we're like, deep inside in your core, you should take a certain step, but your mind is telling you, nope, you can't do that because of this, this, and this. Try to listen to your intuition more because I think there's so much data, there's so much science even around intuition and how accurate it is.
And there could be a trial and error process of it takes not listening to it to then understand like, oh, that's why you should listen
Absolutely.
to it.
Yeah. It's like, hello, I told you. Listen.
Well, thank you so much for joining today and for sharing your experiences and your stories and how storytelling has been important in your life and how you're now helping other people do that. If people want to find out more about you or the Ripple Network, where can they find out
Mhm.
more?
Sure. My email address is very simple. It's sabina@sabinahutchison.com. So you could reach out to me there, or you can look at theripplenetwork.com.
Well, again, thank you so much for coming on, and it was really fun to talk with you. So thanks.
Yeah. Katie, thanks so much for spending this time with me too.
Be sure to check out theripplenetwork.com to learn more about Sabina's platform to help women transform their ideas into inspiring talks and presentations. It's also linked in the episode description. As an additional note, if you're a career pivoter or going through a life transition and you're interested in redefining or reframing your story, check out takeabeatcoaching.com to learn more about a one-on-one coaching program designed to help you tell your story confidently. Thanks for listening and take care.